Hello, this is Janae from the Conscious Community Podcast and Conscious Community Magazine. We wanted to let you know that we have sponsorship packages available. If you are interested in sponsoring this podcast, please email Spencer at spencer@consciouscommunitymagazine.com or call or text 630-492-0831. 630-492-0831. Thank you very much for listening. We appreciate all of you. And we are so grateful for your continued support. Please rate, review, and share Conscious Community Podcast with your friends. Thanks again. Now to our episode. Welcome to the Conscious Community Podcast. This episode, we're speaking with Dr. Jacob Liberman, who wrote Luminous Life about seeing, vision, eyes, color, and more. So welcome, Jacob, to the show.
It's great to be with you today.
Could you tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. I was trained as an optometrist and a vision scientist, and I began doing that work in 1973. I had a series of profound experiences that really shifted my way of looking at and understanding what it meant to see. One of the major events was that in 1976, after wearing glasses for more than 9 years, I had a sudden shift in eyesight while I was in the midst of a meditative experience. That change in eyesight resulted in a 300% improvement in my ability to see, which has now lasted for 42 years. So I have never worn glasses since that day 42 years ago, and I'm 70 now, which is rather rare for people my age to be not wearing glasses. What's interesting is that 300% improvement in eyesight occurred with no change to the eyes. In other words, the prescription in my eyes didn't change at all, yet I was seeing very significantly better. So it caused me to recognize that we don't see from the eyes. There is some aspect of our humanity that is actually having this experience. And so the journey for me over the last 40 plus years has been about investigating the integration of light, vision, and consciousness in terms of uncovering who are we, because the essence of who we are will also tell us where it is that we are seeing from. What is it within our humanity that is having this experience? What began as a miraculous shift in my eyesight got me very deeply involved in the area of light and color therapy, and the realization that light is far more than the brightness that we experience when we look out during the day. Light is actually the intelligence of life, the foundational energy from where life emerges. When light interacts with the eye, it is literally looking for the eye, moving it toward the next thing in our life that we're supposed to attend to. So we often hear the expression, "It caught my eye," but we rarely ask, what is the it that caught our eye? Having looked at this both as an eye doctor and as a scientist for 45 years now, I've come to realize that what catches our eye is actually looking for us and guiding our life's journey. The book really delves into the fact that every cell in the human body has eyes or photoreceptors that are designed to detect and respond to the continual signals of light, which tell each cell what to do, when to do it, and to what degree, because every aspect of our physiology is dependent on light and darkness. And so the degree of light where we are in the world literally synchronizes the body's biological clock with Mother Nature's clock so that we live in a state of harmony with life. And so I've come to discover that the primary purpose of light is to continually upgrade the software of our humanity so that we come into oneness with life itself. And what I'm sharing with you is based in hard science and many years of research on my part and a lot of of direct experience. So even though it may sound like I'm speaking about consciousness or things that are more spiritual, this entire book integrates very current contemporary science with a lot of my own research and direct experience to really lay out a new philosophy, a new science of life.
I think it's interesting you're just talking about the consciousness study and science and how they're coming to be more one. We talked to Ken Wilber a couple months ago about that. It's just really fascinating to see how things are becoming so integrated.
Yeah, that's a common theme with a lot of the people that we've spoken to on the podcast, is that there's these ancient wisdom that seemed very esoteric and perhaps unscientific or superstitious, but that as we approach some of the things that are suggested in quantum physics and some of the most modern concepts about the nature of reality, that in fact a lot of that ancient wisdom makes a lot of sense. And there's that, Ken Wilber's integral theory, which is kind of integrating the spiritual and the scientific and basically saying it's all one and the same.
I think it's interesting in your book you pointed that out. Even in biblical tradition they talk about let there be light as the idea, and maybe we shouldn't be quite so. We've actually kind of dumbed it down, it seems like we've taken it into this place where we boxed it instead of maybe ancient people were more open.
Whether you're looking at this from a religious perspective where the Bible describes the creative force called God as light and speaks of this God or light as being all-powerful, all-knowing, and everywhere at the same time, whether you look at it from that perspective or a spiritual perspective where consciousness is continually spoken of as light, or whether you look at it from a quantum physics perspective where they say the ground of reality, the energy underlying all of life, is the energy of light. So whether you're looking at it from spirituality, hard science, or religion, they all converge to exactly the same point. One of the things that the book is really speaking about, because I've done a lot of work in vision improvement and light therapy over the years, is that most people confuse consciousness or awareness with this mind chatter that we experience throughout the day, which is something totally different. When people experience thoughts going on within them, what most of them don't realize is that the reason we are aware of this phenomenon is because our true essence is actually observing it. If there wasn't an internal witness or observer that sees with no point of view, we would never be aware of the thinking or worrying or internal rehearsal that most of us experience throughout the day. That internal witness, which does not speak from my experience, that internal witness is the source of the seeing. That is actually what is experiencing this reality. What I discovered over the years is that vision improvement wasn't a function of exercising the eyes or changing your mind. It was about recognizing that there's something observing both physical phenomenon and what we call mental or conscious mind phenomenon. And that observer is actually the source from which all this actually originates.
Yes, we're the eyes of the universe, Alan Watts-ism type thing. One thing that was interesting, I noticed in your book, you talked a lot about color and how we perceive color. And I'm kind of curious, when they talk about chakras and color, do you feel that those are literal colors, or do you think, because I've heard that in India, traditionally they had different colors that they associate with different points, and I've seen people have different ideas about that. Do you think it's more of a cultural perception, or do you think it is based on the wavelengths specifically and where they resonate with us?
I'm not going to tell you what I think, because what I think is meaningless, but what I'm going to share with you is what my direct experience is.
Okay.
I've been working in this field for 45 years. The one thing that I noticed in the 1970s is that everyone responds to colors. They have certain colors they feel comfortable with, certain colors they feel less comfortable with. And that is a unique thing for each individual. There aren't certain colors that people like and others they dislike. It's totally different from person to person. When I discovered that, I realized that the colors that people were comfortable with were vibrationally related to the aspects of their life that they were at ease with, whereas the colors they were uncomfortable with related to unresolved issues in their lifetime or unresolved issues that were genetically passed on from their lineage. At that time, I was also introduced to chakras, but I could not find any scientific evidence having to do with chakras, so I just put it aside. Over my many years of working with more than 40,000 individuals, I found a very interesting correlation. The colors that people were uncomfortable with seemed to be very much related to where people developed physical issues in their bodies. And when I compared those two, it was in fact the same idea that you speak of in terms of chakras, that if people were uncomfortable with the color red or orange, most of the time you'll notice that they had difficulties in that part of their system. So I have found a very high significance between that relationship. So in response to your question, do I think it's literal? Yes, I do. I think what people noticed thousands of years ago, or whenever these concepts arose, I have found in my clinical work that I have discovered that empirically, that there is a relationship, and it's a rather significant relationship. So what's the value of this is that in the book, I share how I work with people with color, and I actually allow the reader to go through a process where they can see the colors they're receptive to and the colors that seem to trigger discomfort for them. And in the process, they can actually use a simple visualization at home to work on these issues. I've also developed a system that people can use at home with a series of different filtered glasses that I have developed, and the system helps people to become comfortable with the colors that used to feel uncomfortable for them. And what's important about that is that as their receptivity to the full spectrum of light expands, they begin to become desensitized from the triggers in their everyday life, the emotional triggers that create stress. So my work over the years has gone initially from treating diseases and so on to actually expanding our receptivity to life so that the events in our life that trigger stress and dis-ease, we eventually come to a place of being desensitized from those so that life can be much more full of peace, if you will.
No, that's interesting. Well, that you were talking, I looked at a picture of the chakras, and when you were saying colors that you're uncomfortable with, the color red has always bothered me. I have problems with my lower back, and that's my biggest health problem is my lower back. And I looked at the chakra chart, and that's your sacral chakra is red, and I'm like, that's really weird.
When I've been doing this since the 70s, and I didn't come to this because I read about it or it sounded like an interesting idea. I literally, over time, started seeing this relationship. Now, I've done this with thousands and thousands of people, and consistently, I see the colors they're uncomfortable with relate to not only certain psycho-emotional issues, but relate to where in their body they have physical issues. What's interesting is this: your body runs on light. Now, if I said to you, a plant depends upon light, you'd say, of course, everybody knows that. What I want to share with your audience is that all plants, all animals, and all humans are inseparably connected with light. Every function of your body is light dependent. That's why you wake up in the morning, you go to sleep at night, you go to the bathroom at certain times of the day, you eat at certain times of the day. Your testosterone levels or estrogen levels go up or down depending on the light. All of the functions of your body have to be in harmony with Mother Nature. So for instance, I'm on Maui. If I fly to New York, I'm going to be jet lagged. Why? Because my biological clock is set for the patterns of light and darkness in Hawaii, but New York, there's a 6-hour time difference. So I'm going to feel out of sorts. Now, thank God that over time, jet lag resolves itself and I start feeling normal again. But most disease, chronic illness, is because we are chronically out of sync with Mother Nature, even if we've never taken a trip, because most of us are not living life according to the patterns of light and darkness in nature. Most of us are living life according to ideas that we have, beliefs that we have. And beliefs have nothing to do with life. Ideas are continually changing. What happens in Mother Nature is pretty consistent day to day. So for years and years and years, I have been prescribing different filters, different pairs of glasses, if you will, with colored filters that I've developed that over time help someone like yourself to become comfortable with that color red, for instance. Now, you do it very, very gently, because that color red, if you started looking at it or even visualizing it, it would really trigger some reactivity inside of you. But if you can do it very, very gently over time, you can begin to build up your receptivity to red. And when that happens, it means that your system is allowing in more red. What is the value of that? The red end of the spectrum is transmitted to those lower chakras, which is what energizes all the metabolism and blood flow and energy movement in that part of your body. When someone is unreceptive, for instance, to red, it means they're keeping that part of their system in the dark, like putting a plant in a closet. It just does not receive the amount of nutrition it needs, regardless of what you're eating. See, most people think, oh, I get my nutrition from the food that I eat, but only a third of the energy your body produces is based on metabolized food. 2/3 is based on metabolized light. The ingestion of light is literally what is energizing your cells to create energy, not only for metabolism and the prevention of disease, but for all the repair mechanisms in your body. So this is a very profound field of light. My first book, Light Medicine of the Future, introduced this whole concept to the public in 1991. Luminous Life, the newest book, what's beautiful about that book is it speaks about how to live in a way where we need less fixing, where we begin to recognize that just as our physiology is guided by light, everything in our life is literally guided by the changes in light that are occurring in Mother Nature throughout the day. That's why birds fly south in the winter, why whales go from Alaska to Maui at different times of the year. Those creatures are guided by changes in light and darkness and the spectral characteristics of light in nature. Humans are guided the same way. And so this book just speaks about a lot of different areas, from consciousness and vision to this guidance with light, in such a way that it allows you to realize that, oh my God, there's a whole aspect of my health, my wellness, and my life that I've never even considered.
I think it's interesting you've brought up light, and yesterday was summer solstice, so it's just like a reminder that we need to get ourselves in the groove with nature, really.
Yeah,
and how important that used to be to cultures and to people in the past, and we're starting to go back to that, but we really need to recognize that. I watched a documentary about Antarctica that was really great. I had a year in Antarctica, I believe it's called, and there's a syndrome in Antarctica that they have, and they have all kinds of physical problems, and I'm almost certain it has something to do with, I believe that was their theory, that being in the darkness if you're there in the winter. Because when people who stay down there all year round in the winter, I think it's called P3 syndrome. It's just...
No, it's called SAD. Are you talking about seasonal affective disorder?
No, not seasonal affective disorder. This is more severe than that. And it's seen by these people who spend the year in Antarctica. And they start having memory lapses. They don't remember things. It's like they start to totally...
Like an extreme version of seasonal
affective. An extreme version, yeah. To the point where they just almost can't function.
Yeah, well, you see that in, like, or at least I've heard anecdotally, people who live in, like, Alaska or up in the Arctic Circle where they're, long periods of darkness and they have, like, super high suicide rates because people just go nuts.
Well, that was, the seasonal affective disorder. Clearly, that would attribute to the higher depression rates in certain...
But I've also heard that before the invention of artificial light, every woman on Earth would have had synchronized menstrual cycles, because the only variable in the amount of light they were all getting. I mean, these in the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere would have been the moon. So everywhere,
Right.
no matter where you are on Earth, when it's a full moon, that's the most light that you're getting, because the only light that you get at night that changes is the cycles of the moon. So you literally would have had every woman on Earth would have all been in sync with each other. And now you have women who will synchronize their cycles, but typically only if they're like living in the same household or working in the same office, so that their light levels correspond to their, just being in the same environment.
You're absolutely right. I just came off of a 23-city book tour, and my last stop was in Oslo, Norway. And try to imagine living in Maui and then going to Oslo, Norway, where the light comes up in the morning at 3:30 or 4 a.m. and then stays up until 11 p.m. at night. There are times where it is totally dark. In the winter, it's usually dark so much of the time. And, they haven't even hit their peak. But the point I was saying is that it was so confusing there. You'd be out talking with people. Normally in Maui, we eat at 5 or 6 in the evening. There, you'd be having a conversation, and all of a sudden you'd realize it's 10 p.m. at night and you haven't eaten, because your body is totally confused and doesn't know when it's supposed to eat. Now, why is this significant in relation to our everyday life? Most of us spend most of our days looking at computers, handheld devices, cell phones, and so on. The primary light that is coming out of these devices in very strong amounts is the blue end of the spectrum. Now, there's nothing wrong with the blue end of the spectrum. There's a lot of blue light that comes off the sun, but there's also a lot of red light that balances it out. But on our computers and cell phones, we have an overabundance of blue light and much, much less red light. Well, blue light is what's dominant during the day. So when your eyes receive rays of blue light, it basically tells your brain it's daytime. So try to imagine all the people that are working on their computers at night or fiddling around with their iPhone, because most of us are addicted to these things. They're getting the stimulation of this extreme blue light at night. So the body is saying it's time to go to sleep, and the mind is saying I'm wide awake. And the body is now beginning to get wide awake also because of the blue light. Not only does it disturb your sleep, which is the most part of the healing occurs when people are sleeping, but it impacts everything from how much weight you gain, your insulin production and release, your hormones, everything is impacted by it. So this is a very critical area, and I speak about this in the book. I have a whole chapter on technology and living in an age of technology and the kinds of things we need to really be aware of, so that the beauty of our technological advancements isn't in fact the downfall of our health and wellness.
I was thinking earlier when you were speaking, when I said red makes me uncomfortable, I kind of associate red and the sacral chakra with kind of more visceral things, more I don't know,
right? Root chakra,
animal nature type things, and what's that?
The sacral chakra is orange, root chakra is red.
Root
chakra. It would be the root
chakra.
Yeah.
Okay, so no, I was thinking about this, and then I was thinking about some of like the things that cause me anxiety, and like
it's safety,
all the
actually.
Safety and security and kind of like violence in the world and stuff like that. And then I was thinking about when you said the colored glasses and how you need to desensitize yourself to the color that makes you uncomfortable. I'm like, wait, so I need to look at the world through rose colored glasses? Is that what I need?
Well,
is that what I need to do? Is literally look at the world through rose colored glasses to balance myself out?
What happens is, you just said when you think of those colors, you think of certain physical securities and so on that might be issues in your life. The whole idea is to first notice that there is this relationship. The noticing, the awareness is what is in fact curative. And so when I have my own clients, people that I mentor, working with this system I developed, essentially they begin maybe with 30 seconds the first day. We're not trying to create some sort of big emotional release. We're trying to create a safe space where people feel comfortable embracing what used to be difficult for them to embrace. And the whole idea is a gentle process of expansion rather than any pushing or pulling, which is the way the body works. The least amount that gets the job done is what we need. That's a bit of what I have been involved in for a very, very long period of my life. I love helping people, and in this book, as I said, I share things which are not like conceptual things. What I'm interested in is truth beyond opinion. I'm not interested in just another good idea, because what we've seen is all of our good ideas have side effects. And what I'm looking for are things that are resonant with nature's own intelligence that I have come to uncover through many, many years of seeing certain relationships in life, not only in my own life, but in the many thousands of people that I've had the pleasure of working with. What's important is what really works and what allows people to have a better life, what sort of stimulates change from the inside out.
For much of my life, I came from a very non-spiritual, very scientific, analytical perspective that I was very skeptical.
Sure.
And I was aware of Zen Buddhism and had read the Bible and all this. I was very skeptical, and it wasn't that I didn't want to necessarily believe in anything that I, couldn't see in a very rational Western scientific way. It's just I saw no evidence of it myself. So the way I always put it is I always kept one foot very firmly grounded in objective, Western scientific thought. I didn't really read a lot of philosophy or New Age thought or anything like that. A lot of the conclusions that I came to were just through my own thought experiment, my own observation, my own talking to people. And I came to a lot of these conclusions. And since I've been working on this podcast and we've spoken to all these philosophers and, Zen experts and people from different meditative and spiritual practices, that I'm hearing a lot of the same things repeated that I didn't really seek out I didn't go read this in a book and then repeat it back. I kind of came to these conclusions on my own, and now hearing them from these other people, I feel like there's a lot more validity to that. We've talked about brand name religions, so a lot of people kind of have a negative impression of religion, and they kind of lump spiritual practice and New Age thought or Zen Buddhism, or they kind of lump that all together with going to church on Sunday. But really there is this entire world of spiritual thinkers who are out there trying to find some kind of objective truth. You came to many of the same conclusions in your own way, and again, coming from a scientific medical practice into what you're doing now.
Let me just share something with you. There is no objective truth to anything, because there is always something that is observing whatever you're measuring. And even if that something is a machine, it's a machine that someone has created based on their own perspective. It's a machine that's looking for something. So you're not going to find objectivity. But I want to share with you something directly in relation to what you've been speaking about, which is very true. People put a lot of weight and a lot of importance on science. But science is not ultimate truth. Science is not made up of facts. That's why they call them scientific theories. And the theories are continually changing. So it is a search for truth, but the way the process occurs is just a set of continually changing theories. Now, you spoke about God and religion and all of these things, and I want to come back to something I said before. There are many times during the day that you are probably aware that you're worried about something or thinking about something. Is that correct?
Sure.
How do you know when the mind is worrying or thinking?
You observe yourself worrying, correct?
Yeah, but what is it that is observing what you call yourself?
Well, the bigger consciousness is observing the smaller consciousness.
Yeah, and this is a concept that comes up. I know Sam Harris talks about it a lot because he doesn't believe in it. That there's some kind of driver, some kind of entity that is driving your mind and driving your body. That's kind of like a little imaginary man that's sitting in your head, watching everything happen.
It doesn't make any difference what anyone thinks or doesn't think. That, for me, has no value. And we can call it big consciousness and small consciousness. I think most of the worry and so on and what we call thinking is actually related to activity in the brain. When we speak of consciousness or awareness, people think it's something personal, my consciousness or your consciousness. That isn't my experience at all. What I term awareness, which is this point of observation, which is noticing the physical activity, that is not something that I think about. I experience it all day long. All day long, I'm aware of what I think are my thoughts or my physical sensations. Something is aware of that activity. And that something is undeniable. I don't care whether one is a scientist or a spiritualist or a religious person. Everyone is aware of this phenomenon. When we watch television at night, none of us think that we are the TV screen because we're sitting on the couch and the TV's 10 feet away. Except when the TV is inside the mind or inside the head, as people think of it, they forget that the only reason they're aware of it is because something is observing it. So what I share with people is don't believe anybody's ideas. Do an experiment yourself. See what you discover from your own direct experience. To give you an example, 42 years ago, I had an instantaneous healing of my eyesight. It occurred without any change to my physical eyes. And I've been examined by dozens of doctors. Even my most recent doctor wrote a paragraph about this in the new book. Now, everybody says, well, how does that happen? I don't know how it happens. Well, prove it to me. I don't need to prove it to you. It happened in my own life. I'm 70 and a half. I've not worn any glasses. Everyone that knows me, from my children up, know that I see well at distance and reading. I pass all my driver's tests. The point I'm making is there is no way for the mind to comprehend something that is bigger than its perspective. And so there is no way of finding out the truth by trying to look at it through the conscious mind, because the conscious mind only sees in duality. It sees things as right or wrong or black or white, and what is observing it has no point of view. In other words, it sees from the middle, something that the conscious mind can't do. And so this requires something beyond what you call objective, some objective science. There is no way to evaluate this thing we call awareness through this mechanism that we call the conscious mind. In the book, I speak about the fact that people believe that they're making decisions all day long with the thinking process. But when you actually look at the activity of the brain with the most sophisticated technology, you realize very, very quickly that 7 to 10 seconds before the mind is aware of thinking that it made a choice, the brain has already chosen and is already moving in that direction. So what I'm saying is that we don't have a clue about what's going on. It's much, much bigger than we can comprehend. And this is why I share with people in the book, I make suggestions that can help people to come to their own realization, to uncover what is truth for them.
No, I think that's very important that everyone comes to those conclusions for themselves. I've heard that one of the greatest teachings you ever hear is if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him because he's not the Buddha, because it's
right.
Yourself. You've heard that quote. But
please don't kill the Buddha.
Someone who claims
don't kill the Buddha.
Yeah.
Someone who claims to be, because they're not, is what they're saying. But anyway.
These are all very interesting questions, and one of the reasons I got into this line of inquiry is that I got interested in the phenomena that I noticed, because I follow a number of different fields, from artificial intelligence and computer science and physics and spirituality. I'm interested in all kinds of stuff. They all started talking probably about 2-3 years ago. They all started converging on on the concept of consciousness. That is really one of the last frontiers of science, and it is traditionally the realm of spiritualists and priests and philosophers. All this stuff that really just kind of seemed like a subject that you could just decide not to care about suddenly became very relevant in all these very hard science fields. And I just think this is more of a statement than a question, but I just think it's very relevant to bring everybody who has studied this, from yourself to some of the other people we've interviewed. I think that the work of this podcast and what other people in this field are doing is not necessarily quantifiable, or is not necessarily something that you can explain to somebody who's rigidly analytical and very skeptical, and it's very difficult to get them to take any of this kind of stuff seriously, and they're very dismissive and sometimes outright rude about it. But this is good work too, and we aren't necessarily, as a species, we haven't necessarily figured it all out, but this kind of grasping around and examining these ideas and thinking about consciousness and where it comes from, and it has concrete real world importance in a way that I think that people are somewhat dismissive sometimes. But I think it's
to be dismissive of something is not to be a scientist. As he pointed out, in science you're seeking out why, you're seeking out how, you're seeking answers. You're not saying you know the answers. In science you can say, well, I don't know, but and then you deal with what's coming up.
I hope that we see a broader movement of this, of people who in the scientific community are willing to step outside of, there's UFOs are a great example of this. Whether there are or aren't aliens visiting the Earth is irrelevant. It shouldn't be stigmatized to investigate it. That if you go about it in a rational way, and you're not saying, yes, definitely I saw an alien in my backyard last night, with no kind of evidence or anything, going about a rational investigation of the subject shouldn't be stigmatized, nor should kind of an examination of these spiritual things.
I'd like to urge you to forget the word spiritual and consider something else. Let's imagine that the three of us had never been to a forest before, and we had never seen trees before. And all of a sudden, we come up and someone says, that's a tree, but we had never seen a tree before. You would believe, just based on your direct experience, your observation, that the tree begins at ground level and then goes up. So the tree is just what you can see above ground, because you have no awareness that anything else is going on. But when you begin to examine a tree, and if you unearth it, which of course would kill the tree, but let's just imagine you did that, you discover that under the ground there's another tree. We call it roots. But the tree under the ground is 3 times the size of the tree above ground, and yet you're totally unaware of it. This invisible part that's under the ground keeps what is above ground stable. It is a major source of its nutrition. It's what feeds it and causes it to grow, and yet you're totally unaware of it. That example occurs with everything. Everything in this universe has an aspect that is observable through our perceptual mechanism, and has an aspect that is not observable. It's beneath the ground. It's beneath our awareness. The field of consciousness, just like the roots of a tree, are absolutely there. They are the source from where most of our life comes from. And so I use this example because when we use the word spiritual, most of the people you gave examples of and so on, the ones that are very detailed, which play a big role in many of the discoveries we have, thank God for those people. But because that's the way they're built to see perhaps the tree and not the forest, when you use a word like spiritual, they get shut off immediately. But if you were talking about the roots of a tree as an example, because humans also have roots that you cannot see, and a lot of very sensitive technology can measure a lot of these things. So I think we need to begin speaking about this in ways where our language does not cause someone to close down because they don't understand, or that is not a terminology that they use. And so for me, when I think of what you call a spiritual life, or for instance, my whole life feels guided. And I'm not a new agey guy. I'm a very commonsensical person, and what's important for me is what works and the quality of my life and the love I have in my relationship and the ease with which my children who are grown-ups and I have a wonderful my relationships in the world, my work in the world. That is what's important to me. Not so many concepts, but the everyday things that we do, how we handle our lives. That for me is where the rubber meets the road. What I share in the world is basically what I've learned in my life about the value of science, of the things we can see, and the existence of all these other things that we have yet not uncovered. But because of my own sensitivity, like all of us are sensitive, we pick up different things. We sense different things. So anyway, we've had a lengthy conversation, and I hope it's been valuable.
Oh, yeah. I like that. Yeah, and I do think that the vocabulary can cause problems. I think it causes problems in so many, not just on this type of discussion, but in politics and just...
Yeah, and I was thinking while you were saying that, it goes the other way, too. You have the scientific, rational people who get turned off by anything that sounds vaguely spiritual or New Agey, and then you have, on the other contrast, you have spiritual New Agey people where as soon as you start to talk about, well, that doesn't really add up as far as, physics is concerned, then they're like, oh, science, it's just and they're very dismissive going the other way. So it is kind of like, that was kind of my thought of this entire project, was to kind of find some kind of middle ground, common ground, and start a dialogue going between all of them, and just whatever language we have to come up with that works for both parties. But it is really, it's a division that goes back as long as humanity. So it's not exactly easy not to crack.
Well, thank you very much for speaking with us, Jacob. Is there your book now is Luminous Life, that came out this year. Do you have any more books in the future, other speaking engagements, or anything you'd like to share?
I won't share about speaking. If people are interested in that, they can go to my website, which is JacobLiberman.org, and they'd probably enjoy visiting. It's not a marketing site. I'm really just interested in sharing things that have really, really profoundly impacted my life and the lives of the thousands and 10,000s of people that I've had a pleasure of working with over the years. And so people can go to the website if they'd like to learn more. The book, Luminous Life, is my fourth book, and all the books are available on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or, wherever they like to get books. And most of all, I just am appreciative that we've had an hour to spend together today and could discuss some of these important things in life.
Oh, yeah. It's been a great conversation. Thank you very much for speaking with us. We'll let you know when this podcast is coming out. We have a few.
And we'll be glad to share it. Yes.
All right. Thanks so much for your time, sir.
Enjoy Hawaii.
A pleasure. You have a wonderful day.
You too.
Bye.
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 Thank you for joining us for the Conscious Community Podcast. If you'd like more information about sponsoring this podcast or advertising with Conscious Community Magazine, in print or online, please email me at spencer@consciouscommunitymagazine.com. That's SPENCER, or call 630-492-0831.